Welcome to another episode of Choose Your Destiny with me, your host, Lev Kragulevich. And today I am pleased to introduce to you Dorothy Andreas. And hopefully I have said the last name correctly
Yes.
because sometimes English names, for some reason, you would think after 20 years of living in America, I would be able to say them, and I can't. I still can't. I struggle sometimes. So, Dorothy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you, Nev.
Super excited to have you. So, if you don't mind, just briefly introducing yourself to the audience, tell us who you are and what is it that you do.
Dorothy Andreas. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been pushing my 39th year of uh, different businesses. I've purchased two and started seven, ranging from the beauty industry to technology, a technology company, an importing company, a restaurant. Um, and I love it. I'm an author. I have a best-selling book called Streamline Success. I'm a mother. I have two adult children. I'm a wife. Uh, I'm a eternal volunteer in organizations that I'm passionate about. And I love to help people be their best, just to be their best.
I love that. I love the fact that you have done so many different businesses. And although there's some component of the business ownership that is very much the same, some of the industries of what you are naming are a little bit different. And so I'm certain that there are some different nuances that one kind of has to understand and learn in order to successfully run, own, and operate these things.
Yes, I think there can't be anything further apart from each other than the beauty industry and the technology industry. Because it's they're just so different. But business is business. It's all the same. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all the same. I think the nuances come down to the communication patterns that people from different backgrounds are used to. So when I was communicating with code writers in my technology company, so I'll tell you a little bit about that. And it stemmed from the beauty industry. I put myself in a workshop, a strategic coach Dan Sullivan workshop years ago, and we were looking at what the bottlenecks in our company were. And the bottleneck for me was I had 3 spa locations in 2 different states. The bottleneck was at Christmas time, we sold a tremendous amount of gift cards. This is before gift cards on the internet existed. The internet was still fairly new for business owners. And the bottleneck was I had to close down for services around the 15th of December because in a spa, women are mostly in a robe and slippers and nothing else. And around the 15th, I would start to see this big influx of men coming in to buy gift cards. And I felt that it was disrespectful to our female clients. So we had to close down for services. And I had been thinking for a couple of years, how could I fix this? So we're in this workshop and I have this idea. What if people could buy gift cards on my website? And that technology did not exist yet. So I came back to Pittsburgh and I had a conversation with a few different companies that did code writing. And the first 2 companies said, absolutely not. That technology doesn't exist. That's a great idea, but it's not possible. The third company was the company that designed Dell Computers website. They were based in Pittsburgh. And I met with them and they said, well, technology doesn't exist for anything like what you're talking about. We could probably try to format something for you, but it would be $100,000 to start with. And so, while I was having success in my business, $100,000 wasn't something I wanted to invest in my idea that we had no success in the world that this would work. So I found this group of Carnegie Mellon University is in Pittsburgh. I found this group of guys who started a company called Nova Aurora. who were about to be graduating from, they were actually in graduate school at Carnegie Mellon. And I told them what I wanted to do and how I visualized it. And they said, it doesn't exist, but we think we can take existing technology that there is and piece it together in such a way that we could do this. And I said, what I want is when people come on my website, they can press a button that says buy a gift card. And, we had some design issues there. And they would print out on their printer a piece of paper that was barcoded and numbered that then they could bring in and we would scan it. And so it took about 6 months for them to build this. And we went live on Christmas Eve of 2003. And so we closed my spa locations at 6 o'clock in the evening. So, no overhead at this point other than the utilities, but no staff or postage or anything like that. And 6 o'clock, and I changed all of my advertising that year. So all of my billboards, TV, radio, everything, I took our phone number off of all of our ads just as an experiment. And I just drove people to our website. And I woke up Christmas morning at 6 o'clock and I ran down to the computer and I looked at the program and I could see the orders coming in. They were still coming in Christmas morning. And we had done $21,000 in gift card sales in 12 hours. So I was like, over the moon. And we started putting out press releases and I started getting calls from businesses, not just spas, but businesses around the country. How can you do this for us? So I started another company called Spa Edge. And it was the first in the industry, in the beauty industry. It transformed our industry. So for several years, I had that business. And if people were on your website and they clicked print a gift card, it would seamlessly take you over to a page that was really, you were on my site, but it looked and felt just like your site. And I earned 5% off of every gift card that every business sold. So that was really so out of my comfort zone. I come from the beauty industry, but it changed the way that my industry operates. So it was a couple of years later, technology caught up and now I use somebody else's program. But it was a really awesome thing to be featured in international magazines for this idea that I had that came from a workshop doing bottlenecks. So I guess the long-winded point of the story is investing in yourself and putting yourself into scenarios where you're going to have your brain stretched to where you don't take yourself on your own, I think is a fabulous investment of our resources, time and money.
I love that story. So talk about so many cool things in it. Of one thing I love about it is that you had this vision of how you're going to solve a problem. And to me, entrepreneurs, and you being the serial entrepreneur, are definitely sort of the example, a really good example of what good and great entrepreneurs do. Is you had this idea of how you're going to solve a problem. You kind of came up with a solution that didn't even exist. You didn't give up on your dream. You basically went out there, started searching things. You didn't know if it was going to work. You probably had a good idea that it likely would. You changed your marketing to make sure that it drives people in. And the part that I love about it the most, of course, it worked, which I am certain that it's like that's the best Christmas gift ever, right
Ever.
there, right? Like my idea actually worked. This is awesome. But what I love about it is not only did it work for you, it transformed the whole industry. And you created this thing that a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners struggle with, which is passive residual cash flow.
Yes.
And that was fantastic, right? Because you were able to help me out. Of course, you deserve to get a percentage of my sales. So now you benefit from your stuff, from my stuff, from Susie down the street who is also running the same stuff. And you created one asset that now is bringing in multiple streams of income from multiple businesses.
Oh, it changed my business, Nev. I had 3 physical locations, one in a ski resort in Maryland, one in a beautiful equestrian kind of resort in an area of Pennsylvania, and then the flagship location in Sewickley, Pennsylvania, which is a beautiful community. And I was referring to my website as my fourth and virtual location. And here's how new it was. Wells Fargo was processing our gift cards, and they thought that online sales were so risky, they held my money for 6 months at a time. And I mean, because it was, internet sales were like brand new, it was crazy. So yeah, it was good. But, so where the conversation started, the difference in the industries, when I was talking to tech guys, it was very different than talking to my spa staff, which is very different than talking to my restaurant staff, which is very different than talking to other entrepreneurs that I was selling my service to. So I think, just that flexibility and being able to pick up on language, tone, the tonation, the tonality that's coming across in a phone call or a personal meeting, body language, and all of that is just so incredibly important for an entrepreneur to be able to be aware of how other people are. Well, for anybody, really.
Yeah. That's fantastic, and I absolutely agree with you that, right? There's certain pieces about business that are always going to be the same, right? You have to be profitable. You have to make sure that it runs well. You have to take care of your team. You have to, right? All these different things. But yeah, how you communicate to the clients, because I'm thinking if I am looking for the technology component versus the spa, I'm likely looking for different solutions. I'm not going to come looking for the same thing in the two very different locations. And so, yeah, I could see conversation and language being very different between those.
Yes, it was.
Now, I also know that, and you have mentioned it, that you have recently published a book. And it's my understanding is that it ranked as number one. Yes?
It did. It went to number one on Amazon. I was so excited.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So, I have been thinking about writing a book for at least 10 years because I started being aware that in the beauty industry and in the restaurant industry, turnover is really high. But I don't have turnover. I mean, I still have the first employee that I hired in the one particular company that I have right now 21 years ago. And most of my people have been with me close to 2 decades in an industry that never happens. So I really have spent the last 10 years deconstructing how is it that I'm able to retain clients and retain staff and have this great reputation when other people really struggle with that. So it really, I think it starts the beginning of so the book is called Streamline Success. The subtitle is Eliminate Chaos from Your Service Company. But the feedback I'm getting is fabulous, really, from people who aren't even entrepreneurs. But the first part of the book is about life balance, because you're an entrepreneur. I mean, if we don't have balance I break it down into the 5 key areas. Our physical well-being first, because if we don't have our health, we have nothing. And a really deep dive into what being healthy means to us and why we would want to be healthy, and how health is really generational based off of the belief pattern that we have. I mean, I think so many things in life are generational, but if you grew up in a family that eats fast food all the time and they're type 2 diabetics, you know that if you're going to be a type 2 diabetic. So you already always believe these things about yourself based on how your family of origin was, or, the family that raised you. So it's, physical relationships. If our relationships aren't gelling smoothly, it causes upset in our business. And, being an entrepreneur is tough, and, and just spirituality is so important, and it's not religion, it's just having faith in a higher purpose. And I run my company with a higher purpose, bigger than just how much money I make or how much my staff makes. We take care of organizations that we care about, charities and nonprofits, and that's where 10% of our revenue goes to. And that's the higher purpose. And when I start running into problems, I just have to think about the people that we are able to serve by giving back to the organizations that we do and the difference that we make in their lives. And it sort of puts it all in perspective. So, and, you know, and then talking about career and finances. And finances, as you know, generational thought patterns. You know, I believe that we make decisions, subconscious decisions as young children about the way that money flows to and from us. And we live our life based on decisions we made when we were like 4, you know? And so thankfully there are guys like you who can educate us.
Yeah, thank you. I absolutely agree. It's, one of those things that as an adult, as a child, it doesn't matter. We are creatures of habit. We're creatures of watching what other people around us do. And so our closest environment ends up being sort of the model of what life is.
Yes.
And as a parent, as an adult, we have this incredible burden that not only are we running the same program that our parents ran, who got it from their parents, who got it right, like we're talking that linear, multi-generational thing. But, where I have found myself, and it sounds like perhaps you have, and I'm actually interested to ask some questions, but where I find myself is that I have learned that in order for me to look at my kids and my sister's kids and like the young ones coming up in a family, I had to be the change. I had to be the light to
Yes.
change things for them. And so, and went on this exploration and stuff that, I wasn't raised with parents who were entrepreneurs. I had this conversation with my sister recently, and we both went in very different ways, but both entrepreneurial ways. And, I remember one time we're just talking and joking, and she was like, well, I don't know, like kids see me running all over the place doing stuff. I'm like, that's good for them.
It is.
This is amazing for them to see mom fulfilled, really happy, trying all these different things. I'm like, imagine if our mom and dad were doing some of these things, but they didn't know. We know better, so now we got to do better.
Right.
Now, I'm curious to know, have you grown up from the parents that were very entrepreneurial, or did your parents mostly have jobs?
My parents were both very driven, hardworking. Post World War II, my father was in the Air Force, and so I grew up with that mindset of we just work as hard as we can. So my father was in a management position with now absorbed by General Motors, but it was at the time Fisher Body, and my mother didn't graduate from high school, so she went back and got her GED because she married my father and 2 years later had a baby, and she just, it was just a different era then. And she was one of 12 children who were German and Hungarian immigrants. So, it was what it was. So my mother went back and got her GED, and then she went to beauty school, which probably had some influence on me. And she bought a hair salon, and I used to help her in her hair salon. And so I didn't view them. And then my father ended up being an elected official. He was a district magistrate, which was like running a business. I mean, he had employees and he took care of people. I don't think that I viewed them as entrepreneurial. They were hardworking and very practical. But I felt like my really great money lessons came from my an aunt and uncle who didn't have children, and they loved me. And so I spent a lot of time with them. And I felt like they taught me some really good lessons about responsibility and saving money, and just, save before you spend.
Yeah, yeah, it's right. So it's interesting that you say that because right, like listening to your growing up story, I can see some components. It might have not been entrepreneur as you say, but right, like I can see some components that kind of run with it. And for me, my both of my parents worked in banks, so they were not entrepreneurs. My mom was an accountant for one of the national banks. My dad ended up being first broker for central bank, right? Like interbank lending and stuff. And I was just fascinated with all of that stuff. And as a kid, right? Like, I mean, I love going to bank and, right? Like helping out. I don't think I did really anything of helping out. It was just more of, they would probably give me some trivial things just to keep me away from things.
No, it's the best thing we can do as parents. I mean, they made you comfortable dealing with money. you
Yep.
know I think that's it. And when I was a little kid, I wanted, if I wanted to be with my mother, I had to be around her when she was working.
Yep.
And so I got very comfortable with hair and things related to that. So it's in my book, I actually talk about this. I give some specific examples of when we get positive feedback from our parents as young children. That's usually, kind of the business that we go into. And then, as a mother, I thought, when I opened this particular company that I still have, that's 21 years old, it was at that time probably, this is like my fifth business. And my sons were little, and on Saturday mornings they had to come to work with me. So I put them to work in the laundry room, and they had to do laundry. I mean, they were like 7 and 11 years old, and we made it a game. I mean, we made it a game. If they had friends who stayed overnight, the friends came and they'd have a race who can fold the, there's a very specific way that we do our laundry, fold our sheets and towels. So they had to be very exact about it. So they would train their little friends how to fold towels, and then they would have a race, and like whoever folded the most towels in so many minutes would get like an extra dollar. And so my kids, slave labor, but they came to work, and in the summertime, they watered our gardens and they picked the weeds in the gardens and they did whatever it took. But they'd get a few dollars for doing this. I mean, literally like $3 or $4 for the day. And they weren't there with me the whole day, maybe 4 or 5 hours until their dad would come and get them. But I put them on my payroll,
Yeah.
and I used their paychecks to fund their IRA accounts. And, we're entrepreneurs. We can do that. And they were legitimately working. If an IRS agent worked in there, they were. So I started their compounding money for them when they were like 7 and 11 years old. And it's a beautiful thing. So, at this point, they're both very hardworking, and they value money, and they both have way more money saved than I ever did. They're 28 and 32. I mean, they have like money in the bank, and then they have collateral. So it's just thinking through how you want to improve the next generation of your family.
Now, what's really cool about that strategy, and I love the fact that you did that. I was going to ask you, did you put them on a payroll? Please say yes.
Yes.
So I love the fact that you did that because, right, they're your kids. You were going to give them money anyways, right? You're going to give them an allowance. Parents do that. So if you have a business, get them in. You're teaching them some important life lessons. You're teaching them to value money, to value work, to understand what it is. And they're still getting money. You are paying them pre-tax, which means you're saving money on the largest expense we all have, which is tax. And I love the fact that you then decided to open up Roth, because most people don't understand you can do that with the kiddos the moment they're born.
Yes.
You can start a Roth for them legally and just put in, because that time the compounds things. Now we're talking huge amounts for not something huge that costs you at the time.
Oh, I mean, I think at the time I started this, the max amount you could put into a Roth IRA, I think was like $3,000. So, and they were on my payroll really um, until they left and went, until it was like not really going to be a legitimate thing for them to be on my payroll. And I thought, they're in college. They clearly are not working in my company anymore. But they have six figures in their IRA accounts. I had to stop contributing to mine. They didn't. So, and they know, I think they've got this huge sense of pride that they worked for that money. They earned that money, you know.
Yeah. And this is
Yeah.
this is one of those things that I say, like if you are able to start it super early and contribute, it really ends up being pennies if you really think about it.
Yes.
And the impact, right? Like what you have done for those kids, and they're not kids anymore, they're adults now. But what you have done for them is change the entire trajectory of their financial life. And
Absolutely.
I don't know if you knew that when you were, or you were just, you know what? I gotta take care of the kids, so off they go with me, and let's make fun out of it.
No, I mean, I wanted the deduction in my business, like you said,
Yeah,
and I didn't have to put my kids on payroll. I could have taken a higher salary, but like, how much do you need, And 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 they knew what I was doing. I mean, they knew the whole financial plan. They knew specifically that we are investing in your future. You will not see this money until you're at least 59 and a half years old. And, when you're a little kid, 59 and a half is like never coming. And, now that they're 28 and 32, they're like, wow, this is really cool. But I said to them, we will keep investing as long as we can. And then when, I'm no longer having you on my payroll, I mean, they both invest money into their IRA accounts. They don't max out on their IRA accounts because they're invested into other things right now, but they still put money in their IRA accounts every year. And and when they were like teenagers, I started telling them, you will have this to show as collateral when you go to buy your first house.
yeah,
You have that. Like, this makes you strong. Unfortunately, their father came from the banking industry, and he's really brilliant with money as well. So, but people who have young children, it was a very small sacrifice that I made, but that sacrifice didn't only change the trajectory for my sons, it's my future grandchildren who are going to benefit from
oh
that
yeah,
as well.
oh yeah, oh yeah. It's one of those things every so often when I do a webinar or live teaching or whatever, and I always showcase of what's possible through proper investing, and if you do it early on, and literally show people how they can go from zero to $1.3 trillion, not billion, not million, I'm talking trillion with the T, in 2 generations, right? In
Wow.
80 years, in less than a century, you're able to go from zero to 1.3 trillion. And it just requires time and consistency, and leave it alone. Don't touch
Yeah.
it.
Yes. Yes.
It's right. And so it's not that difficult, but it does require habits. And that's something that, as we were talking, that was something that first thing that kind of came through of it was the habits, right? And I actually want to ask you questions because, it's not very often that we hear of entrepreneurs who have successful businesses for, you know, longer than 5 years. I mean, the statistic alone shows that vast majority of them disappear within 5 years. 10 years is basically much leftover. Anything after that, I mean, very small portion. Um, have you had any challenges? I'm pretty certain I know the answer, but have you had any challenges over the decades
Oh,
of business ownership?
oh my God, Nev, read my book. I mean, yeah. So I left college. I was putting myself through college. I was 19. I had a car that I had paid for. I sold my car to get the money, a couple $1,000 to buy the business. And the first day that I walked into the business was a hair salon. I knew that I knew how to do hair, but it didn't occur to me that I really had no idea how to run a business. I mean, I had no idea how to run a business. I was good at my craft, but I knew zero about business. And the first day I went to check out the first client and I didn't have change in my drawer. And, you know, that conversation we always have in our head, like, oh my God, I'm so stupid. I'm a failure. I can't do this, whatever. I'm sitting there and the woman handed me a $20 bill. And I was like, I said, I didn't even think about getting change. And she said, oh, that's okay. I'll see you next week. And I called my mother and I said, Mom, can you bring me $20 worth of change? I like didn't even think about that. And I remember like halfway through my first day thinking, I'm going to sink or I'm going to swim. I am never going to sink. I am going to learn how to swim. I mean, that was the analogy I made. So in 1980, you know, there were not resources for young women in business who didn't have a college education. There weren't like women's networking groups didn't exist then. You know, it wasn't there. So the only resource that I really had were the clients sitting in my chair every 30 minutes that I would, you know, I had to pick their brains. I mean, I had to ask them, how do you conduct an interview? Because I've never interviewed anybody before. How do you conduct an interview? How do you fire somebody? And one of my clients was an accountant who worked for H&R Block. And she said, I'll tell you what, if you start coming to my house on Tuesday nights, I will teach you what you need to know about the administrative end about a business. And I will barter that in exchange for you doing my hair and my family's hair on Fridays. So every Tuesday night I went to her house. And at that time, you know, we didn't have QuickBooks. It was a Dome weekly brown record keeping book.
Oh yeah.
And, you know, and that was really how I learned how to understand what a profit and loss statement was, how to do inventory, how to reconcile statements. You know, and I lost that business in a fire. So a couple of years into it, so I'll just step back and say, when I bought the business, I sort of just had a phone conversation with the person who provided the insurance for the business. And we, you know, I never met them. They never came to call on me. They just sent me a bill once a year for business insurance. And I didn't know that I needed to upgrade that until I had a fire. A couple of years later, it was during Lent. And at the time I was going to mass every morning during Lent. And I was on my way out the door to church. It was 10 minutes to 7 and the phone rang. And who's calling my house at 10 minutes to 7 in the morning? And I answered the phone and it was the fire department. And they said, the building that your business is on is on fire. Can you bring your key up? And so, you know, I lived like 2 minutes from there. As I was driving down the street, I saw them there were also apartments in the building, and a girlfriend of mine lived in one of the apartments. They were carrying her out in a body bag. And I kind of like didn't know what was going on, and news cameras were there. And you know, when I went to church at 7 o'clock in the morning, I pulled jeans on and a jacket over my pajama top. So here I am trying, you know, I'm being interviewed on TV stations, and I'm like tucking my white flannel pajama shirt under my jacket so people couldn't see it. And it was so surreal, and I lost everything that I had. And it was at that point that I learned I was grossly underinsured. So, and you know, I'm doing these live videos on Instagram under Streamline Success or Dorothy and I. And yesterday's video was about this particular thing. What separates long-term entrepreneurs apart from people who quit and get a job? And it never occurred to me that I would let that break my stride. I mean, it was like, okay, fortunately, as the gods aligned themselves behind me, I happened to transfer phone calls to my house when call forwarding was like a thing back in the 80s. I forwarded the phone calls to my house because my last client canceled early the night before, and I took my appointment book home. So by the grace of God, I had my appointment book and my phone calls. Somebody called the salon, it rang in my house, and I could reach everybody, you know, and everybody knew this was a big story on the news that had happened. But it was less than 3 months. I was up and running in a new location, and became friends with my insurance agent. And at that point, I added tanning to my business, which tanning beds were a thing then. And I got to tell you, I made a ton of money off of tanning beds. And I was just having so much fun. It didn't occur to me that this tragedy could ever set me back. And I have 20 stories like that throughout my career. But I got really nervous at that course. So I called my son and I said, what do you think I should talk about? And he said, Mom, you're the best at moving through chaos of anybody that I've ever seen. Like, chaotic things happen and you just deal with it and you move on, and you moved us through it. We had a house fire. We lost everything we owned when my kids were little. Power surge came into our house. We were well insured. So it turned a chaos into a shopping trip and some paperwork. And had I not had that previous lesson with the fire in my business, I would have never known how important insurance and upgrading your insurance as you grow is. So it was a great lesson. But and that is really what inspired the title of the book, Streamline Success, Eliminate Chaos from Your Service Business. But it's really about eliminating chaos from your life. So I'm sorry, I'm like going off on a tangent here, but
No. This is fantastic. And what I love about it, it's that determination that I will make this work. Come hell and high water, and I don't mean to be offensive to anybody here with the saying, but it is the saying.
it is.
I will make this happen. I'm not giving up. And, I always think of, I think it was Tony Robbins who delivered the speech, and I think it's available on YouTube. So folks are welcome to go search for it. But he does this whole thing of, right, like how easily we give up, especially in today's age, right? Like we try
Right.
something once, it doesn't work, we automatically write it off and we move on. And he said, let's think about having a child, right? And you have a kid and they're about to learn how to walk. And that kid, and I'm sure that you as a mom can relate to it, right? Up and down and up and down and up and down. And just watching them, you're exhausted, right?
Yes.
But never for a moment do we as parents go and say, honey, you tried this about 25 times. Just give up. Walking is simply not for you. No, we're up there. We're cheering. We're getting on. We're like, yeah, you can do this, right? Like we're doing everything we can to get them to actually walk. And then, of course, once they're up running, I mean, forget it. Then you wish that they never learned how to do that trick because now you're chasing them all over the house. But that's the mindset that you are showcasing that
Now,
I'm so
yesterday in this video that I created, I put a title over because I'm learning how to do IGTV, like keep them on your story, because it's all new uncharted territory for me. The title of yesterday's thing, where I talk about how the first fire could have set me back. Failure is the F word, and failure truly is the F word in my family. And in the book, back to your point about businesses lasting 5 years, I believe that there are two different business models. There's the faddish, fast and fad-like business model that is a trend, and in the beauty industry, I'll use this because it's great. I watched it happen and I almost bought into it and then I didn't, and I'm glad that I didn't. So 10 years ago, eyelash extensions for women, wear mascara, it's like a nuisance. Eyelash extensions were the newest, hottest things. And there were like eyelash extension kiosks and in strip malls, businesses popping up all over the place. And I looked at it and I went, okay, that's a short-term model. My internet gift card turned out to me to be a short-term model because I'm not from the technology background that I knew how to do anything more than the idea that I thought of. So, but service businesses that are around for a long time are because they develop a great reputation and they provide a great service and tremendous value. So if I would have gotten into a short-term faddish type business, trendy, like the eyelash thing that is, kind of run its course. I mean, there are still people who are doing it and providing that service and women love it. But for the most part, women don't want to go every 3 weeks and have eyelashes glued to their eyelids or, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I think it's a great thing. It's just, it is what it is. If I had gotten into that business and signed a 10-year lease in a strip mall and that trend ended, I'm in serious trouble. I'm in serious, serious trouble. So I think when people always ask me this when, in situations, how do I know what business to get into? And I say, find the thing that you love to do so much that you can't wait to get up and do it in the morning. And then for me, when I was a teenager, it was cutting hair. I love to cut hair. It's awesome. And it's a power trip that somebody sits in your chair and you take a pair of scissors to their head, where their brain is, and you affect the way that they look and feel for the next 6 weeks of their life or until their hair grows out. And it's instant gratification. It's instant money. You walk away at the end of every day with tips and money and, and I loved it that I provided employment for primarily single women who are heads of household. But, when people say, what kind of a business should I start? I say, find the thing you love to do so much that you love to do it, and find out a way to do that thing that's newer, better, and more different than the way that other people were doing it, and get to work. Like, just go do it. Just every day figure out how you can be better. And I mean, I don't even look at my competition. So I've ridden this spa wave that started out where I created the spa industry in the Pittsburgh region. Here's how new it was, Nev. People would stand outside of my business and look at the sign and walk in and say, what is a day spa? Like, what is it? This is 1986, which was a different business than the one I have now. I sold that business. People would say, what is a day spa? And, so I had to create a market for what a day spa meant to this region. And it was awesome. And then I had like 1,000 competitors. And then I had people copying my advertising and copying my logo. And then I had to learn about copyright law. And, so it was just this sort of like the ladder I was climbing was against myself. It was not against my competitors. It was just, how can we be better every single day at what we do? And how can my staff love their job so much that they can't wait to get here in the day? That this is like the most fun they have in their day is when they get to come to work. And that's the culture that we intentionally work to have. And, it's awesome. Like I said, we've been around for decades. And, I've never felt like I've worked a day in my life, ever.
That's amazing. And, I am a firm believer of, um, you know, the same line of money is absolutely useless if what you do to make it, to earn it, to get it, to keep it, if you hate with every fiber of your being,
Mm.
because all you're going to do is you're going to just resent it. And so money for money's sake is that's not the answer, right? And I'm a
Right.
person who is very passionate about wealth and building stuff for yourself, for your family, for right, like leveraging and strategies and stuff. But there has to be things that are aligned, especially when you're talking about business. And in just listening to you, I absolutely agree. It's one of those things that find something that you love doing so much that you would do it regardless whether you get paid or not,
Right.
because you will be fulfilled, you will be happy. And people make money in all kinds of ways, doing all kinds of cool things. And part of this show is also to really showcase that there's all these different ways that you can make money, and people are able to find and figure out things that fulfill them, that make them happy, that give value to other people. And at the same time, they're able to generate money for themselves, and then leverage some of the strategies that exist over there just to make it that much better.
Oh,
And so,
absolutely. My oldest son is a jewelry designer who's got a really great name for himself in the industry. And he used to love graffiti art. He used to love it when he was, and for his 13th birthday, I was worried when he was 12 that he was going to be out tagging stop signs with graffiti. That was my fear. So I found a graffiti artist who was living in Pittsburgh at the time that the city had hired, and we have a lot of bridges here because we have these three rivers. They hired this guy, Mike Walsh, to do graffiti, like paint beautiful graffiti scenes under the bridges. And so, as a surprise to my son for his 13th birthday, I had this kid who was like, Mike Walsh in his 20s, came over to our house for dinner and taught my son the value of art around graffiti, that it's an art form. It's not just like a little vandalous thing that kids who loiter on the corners do when the street lights go out. And my son loved it, and he had a talent for it. And this guy recognized his talent when he was 13 years old. And so I fostered that talent. I mean, there was a time, he was probably 15, where I bought this commercial building, and I had my corporate offices there for a while, and then I was getting ready to sell it. So, we pulled all of our stuff out, and I said to my son, I gave him like a chore to do, and if you do this chore, you can earn $30. And once you earn it, I'll take you to the store where they sell like graffiti supplies. And if you want to hire your little brother as your assistant, you can do that, but you will have $30 to buy paint and these like nozzles that graffiti artists use. Yeah. And you can go paint whatever you want on the inside of this building because they're going to be gutting this building. So you have like a couple of weeks to go do whatever you want. And they painted these beautiful scenes. I mean, we took pictures of it. So it's no coincidence. It's not, by happenstance that my son is a jewelry artist right now. And it's the same way. I mean, he sits down and he is in his groove when he's in his studio. And he got picked up by some famous rap stars last year. And, when he called me about it, I said, that may be temporary. So take that money and invest it into like an appreciable asset. So every time he sells a big, like, a $10,000 or $12,000 piece, he like remodels a bathroom in his house. He puts new windows in, he put a new roof in, so he's putting it into something that's gaining value. And, but the same thing, he doesn't feel like he works. And my younger son, who got dragged around to awards programs with me when he was young, had to like dress up and learn how to go engage with people and shake hands because I brought him with me to a lot of very adult events. And, he's in sales and he's brilliant at sales because he had to learn when he was a young kid. We did mock conversations. When you shake somebody's hand, you ask them what their name is, where they're from, what their business is like. And so it's same thing. Like he goes into a business and introduces himself and finds out everything he can about their business. And man, he is like winning award after award in his company. And he just came in 366% over budget for sales for last year. And, so I'm sorry, I'm like going into these tangents here, Nev, but if anybody's watching this and you're a parent, I'm telling you, you have no idea what you can infuse into your children that affects them for the rest of their life.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And they may not know it at the time, right? And especially if you make it into fun and games. My gosh, what we're able to do with them because their minds are so pliable and things stick around. I forgot this at some point in my life and then it came back to me. I always credit my mom for, a lot of my financial success because I remember when I was a kid and mom must have said it multiple times. I don't remember. I just remember her saying it that, right? You never spend more than you earn. And when you invest, you never take the principal out. And those were like the two key things that my mom, said that just sort of stuck with me, that once you put it, like, that's where it goes and you never touch it again, right?
Right.
Some of the earnings, fine, you can play with that if you want to, but you don't touch the principal
Right.
ever. Like, right? Like, it was a law.
Yeah.
And it stuck with me, and it made a huge difference. And now as an adult, I'm able to look back and be like, oh, they could have done this and they could have done this. But right, the looking back, it's much easier to figure out what you could have done than at the time. So we all do the best that we can at the time with what we have to work with. And I truly believe that. And wanted to do this stuff to be able to inspire the teens, the young adults, the parents to really start considering things in life, that there's no one answer to life.
Oh my gosh.
There's multiplicity of things, and it's like your creativity and what you're able to do and what you're able to come and create and do is just it really, the only limit is just what's up here. And I think in
Yeah.
speaking with you, you're in many ways, to me at least, a living proof of many of those things.
I mean, Nev, I came from pretty much nothing.
Yeah.
I didn't win the genetic lottery. Um, I wanted a better life. I liked nice things. I wanted nice things. And here's the other piece of this, that I don't think I even realized how much I did this until very lately, when I'm putting my focus on this, is manifesting the life that we want. I mean, I don't think I use the term manifest, but it's like I always had this belief that if I could see it, I could do it. And so when I really wanted something, I would start visualizing it. And right after Joel's masterclass course that we did together, I left that course and I flew over to Colorado to spend my son's birthday weekend with him and his girlfriend. And while, I was, how we were when we came out of that class, we were like so pumped. We could have like moved a mountain, literally, each one of us on our own. That was such an awesome course. I just love what Joel Bauer teaches and how he inspires people. But I was there with my son, and he said, "Oh, I want to show you this podcast." It was Joe Rogan and this guy Kevion, and Kevion was talking about how he manifested a car and a job. And I started thinking, what do I have to lose? I am envisioning that I'd already started writing the book on the airplane, on the flight after the course. I'm envisioning a number, like number 1 in front of the title of my book. And for the next 4 months, I would wake up in the morning. I have a ritual when I wake up. I thank God for everything in my life. And then I would close my eyes and I would just visualize this number 1 book. And that, like, I could stand there and hold my book, Streamline Success, and say number 1 bestseller. And that was my visual. And so I knew it was going to happen. Like, there was no doubt in my mind that it couldn't happen. And it made, it was 14, 15 hours a day working to get this book out the door. Never felt like work to me, just never felt like work to me. So when I think about manifesting, then I started thinking, what is it that I want to do next with all of, I've got 39 years of entrepreneurial experience in overcoming crisis and chaos and, almost losing my company and turning it around and getting it back and doubling the income in 14 months and crazy, crazy stuff. Is I'm about to step into territory that's new for me. So I got a coach, a guy that I met through Joel's course, Jeff Faudalin, who is a transformational coach. And, we had this conversation about any negative limiting thoughts that I still am hanging on to from childhood that may stop me from being who I believe I can be. I want to get rid of. And this guy took me through his process, and it was like phenomenal. I mean, life-changing. I'm doing stuff now that I'm not even sure what I'm doing. I just know that I'm doing something, I'm doing something. And I put up a post. I made a little 5-second video this morning of my decaf coffee pouring into my cup. And I said, you know, I'm having so much fun. I've had to switch to decaf coffee.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome and really funny. So, yeah. Well, I could talk to you, Dorothy, for hours because you have so much knowledge and so much wealth of knowledge. And, and I'm also looking at time and I know that I don't want to drive folks from not wanting to continue and stuff. So it is my sincere hope that you will come back to the show and we can dig into some additional pieces because what you are able to offer to folks, not just through your book, but just through your experience, and I'm sure that you are helping entrepreneurs in multiple ways of how they can recreate, even a portion of your success for some folks out there is going to be huge. And, the law of habit and the law of inertia says that if you're able to generate even a little bit, right? Then if you can do a little bit, you can do a little bit more. And if you can do a little bit more, you can do a whole lot more, right? And so all of those things are important. And I really do want, and I hope that you would be open to coming back and kind of sharing a bit more and going a bit more in details of some of the stuff of what you do and how you do that for people.
I would love to, Nev. And, I mean, thank you. Your questions just inspired, a lot of minutes of answers. But what I'm working on right now, besides my businesses, is I'm I've been asked to do some corporate training on conflict resolution. And I thought, well, I'm building out the modules for that. I've actually got it done. That I will be, offering an online training course for conflict resolution because to me, conflict resolution is it's like domestic violence. Nobody wants to talk about it, but it exists everywhere and it costs companies billions and billions of dollars when conflict is not handled properly. So I see that being, a place that I'd really love to be able to just help people understand everything there is around conflict and resolving it. So that's what I'm looking forward to. So I'd love to come back on and talk about that at some point.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I'd love to get that more and let's definitely make sure we come back and schedule something and really go in depth because I agree with you. That's incredibly important. Now I always ask folks, every single guest on the show, two questions. And so that's kind of how we typically wrap it up. The question number one is what is the most inspiring book or the book that made the most influence in your life or the one that you recommend the most?
For entrepreneurs in the service industry, I would say the E-Myth Revisited by Ken. I can't think of his last name right now. Excellent book. For spiritual growth, The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. Those two books are right up there. Those are,
Awesome.
great.
Yeah, the E-Myth. I have actually read the E-Myth, I believe, but not E-Myth Revisited. Because I think they're two different books. So thank you for that.
I think it's just the newer edition of the original E-Myth.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm sure that there's like new stuff in it, which is always good and important to catch up on.
Yes.
Excellent. So thank you. Thank you for that share. That's really empowering and amazing. And then final question that I always have for folks is where can people find you? Where can they connect with you? Where can they learn more about what it is that you do? Whether it's the course that you're talking about or just the plain old, you know what, just come hang out with me.
My website, streamlinesuccess.com. My name is Dorothy Andreas, so I have a Facebook page of Dorothy Andreas, but I also just started a Streamline Success page on Facebook, and I'm on Instagram, again, 2 accounts as both, one Dorothy Andreas, one Streamline Success. Pretty much the same thing going up on both of those, but streamlinesuccess.com, send me an email, contact me that way. If you have a question, I'd love to answer it. I just love to help people. So
You're a wealth of knowledge. Folks, we have potentially not even scratched the surface, because how do you get 20 some years, right? Decades of experience into a short 1 hour video? It's absolutely impossible. Please go visit Dorothy's website, connect with her on Instagram and Facebook. You will find that this woman knows her stuff, knows what she's talking about. And when she speaks about things, it's experience speaking from her, which is why she's able to speak so clearly about things that matter, that don't matter, what you focus on, what you don't focus on. And I don't even know if she's taking clients to help them with this. I have no clue. I am telling you what to do, and maybe you can convince her to take you on. But if you are thinking of starting a service business, if that's something that you're like, you know what, this could be a cool thing, and financially speaking, it actually can be a very cool thing, reach out to Dorothy, and whatever you need to do, however you need to convince her to teach you even a portion of what she knows, it will be well worth your time and investment. Dorothy,
Thank you.
thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming to the show.
Thank you, Nev. Thank you so much. Honored to be here.